Ooh, spooky. All right. Well, as I said, my name is Tim Hansel and birding by ear. And what we're going to do today is we're going to start off with a few things, just some basics about, why it is that birds sing and how they sing and why it's important to have this as a skill when you're out birding. And then we'll get into the actual birds themselves. We'll start with some of the sort of more common birds and some that have the more famous mnemonics in terms of remembering the call. And then, because the acre acquisition is so important, we are going to get into some grassland bird stuff. And then we'll finally end up with some conversation about the technological advances in birding by ear. And so some of you probably know where I'm going with this, but we'll talk about that at the end. And of course, afterwards, we'll have some time for questions. So try not to shout them out right away, kind of just wait until we get to the end part. Sound good? All right, great. So, why do birds sing? Any guesses? Communication. What are they communicating? Danger. What's that? Presence. I'm looking for a mate. Look at me. I'd like some sex, right? That kind of stuff. So a lot of times when we talk about bird song is the two biggest categories of bird song are for attracting mates and establishing territory. So some of the birds that one of the most obvious birds for for establishing territory would be the red-winged blackbird. So the red-winged blackbird is very vicious defender of its territory, and it lets you know with its very pretty song, right? Which is that. And then, of course, some of the more prettier songs are for sort of attracting mates, and a lot of what we're going to hear today fall in these two categories. They tend to be the more complex songs. They tend to be the more interesting in terms of their patterns and prettiness, and so we'll stick with that, but I do want to mention some of the other sounds that birds make and the other reasons. So the non-song sounds that usually come out of the bird's mouth we call calls, and they're usually classified into alarm calls, contact calls, and begging calls. So alarm calls are just, hey, there's trouble, look over there. There's some weird-looking guy with a camera, and I think he might be trouble. Contact calls you hear a lot when birds are in flight, right? If they're migrating, they're keeping track of each other in the air. And begging calls are what little babies do when they want some stuff. And then on top of that, birds make other sounds, and sometimes not from their vocal cords, but doing other things. So oftentimes, when we talk about woodpeckers, we'd be talking about the drum of the woodpecker, which is not trying to attract anybody or do anything. It's just the sound it makes when it's trying to eat. And but sometimes the drum can be very distinctive, and it can help us in identifying certain species. Some birds make a sound just with their wings as they fly. The airflow over their feathers will sometimes make a distinct sound. And I have an example of one later, and that can be something they use for identification. And then finally, I just threw in beak snaps, because sometimes they snap their beaks. And so those are some of the sounds that birds make. But we're talking mostly about the vocal cords of the bird. So how do birds sing? Well, the birds are better than us because they have a double vocal cord action called the syrinx. And the syrinx is down where the windpipe branches off into the two lungs, right? So our vocal cords are up here, where it's just one area of airflow, and the birds are down here, and there's two. And so the birds, one of them I'm thinking about immediately comes to mind is the eastern towhee can make different sounds coming out of different airways, and so they can be their own duet. Which is pretty cool, and it's not something that I can do. And this is a yellow warbler. He's just cool looking, so I threw him in the picture as well. There's an owl. So why does it matter to bird by ear? Why do we need to, if we're interested in birding, what is the advantage of developing this skill of recognizing bird song and understanding the different types of songs. So I have the 4 L's of birding by ear. So this is trademark me, and this is very important. So number 1, leaves. Leaves exist, and it's an unfortunate reality that we all, as birders, must deal with. It can't always be April, and eventually those leaves are going to come, and they are going to hide the bird. So if we can bird by ear, we are oftentimes have an advantage because we often hear the bird before we actually see it, and sometimes we don't see it at all. So I took a bunch of 6th graders out into the woods yesterday to go listen for birds, and we heard a Wilson's warbler, and we heard an oriole, and we heard a red-bellied woodpecker, but we never saw it. But I was nevertheless able to say, hey, that's a Wilson's warbler, that's a oriole, and that is a red-bellied woodpecker. And so they could interact with the bird at the level of hearing it, even if they didn't get to see it. The other value is just that the sound of the bird can lead you to the location. So maybe you will see it. And maybe having the sound coming out of the forest will allow you to get to where it is. So that's good. The other L is learning. So some birds, and this would be flycatchers, I can only tell by their song. I cannot differentiate a willow flycatcher from a least flycatcher from an eastern wood pewee by looking at it. I am dumb, and I have just an inability to spot minute details in the types of these birds. And so if I can hear them, then I am able to make that identification. So I can learn the different types of birds and learn how to ID different types of birds with my ear. So I had to shoehorn that L in a little bit. So learning. All right. And the final L is loveliness. Also a little shoehorned, but it works. It's pretty. I think there's an aesthetic enjoyment to at least some of these bird calls. Some of them maybe not so much. But for the most part, there's something interesting about them. It's cool what these birds can do, and it's just kind of a neat feature of our natural world. So you should just like it 'cause, okay? All right. So when we start listening to the birds, we're going to get to that very soon, we want to have some shared language of how to talk about these bird songs. So I have 5 things up here. I could probably put more if I thought about it. But these are the standard things that birding by ear folk kind of point to. Number 1 is pitch. So that's the highness or the lowness of the sound. So if I'm talking up here, right, that's a high pitch. If I'm talking down here, that's a low pitch. And if I'm in the middle, that's a medium pitch. And you get birds who span the range of pitch, and some sing very high, some sing very low. And that's going to help us in many cases in identification. Tempo of the song, so as the bird chirps, sometimes they go really fast, sometimes they go really slow, sometimes they're somewhere in the middle. Rhythm is kind of related to tempo, but tempo has to do with the speed of the individual notes. The rhythm of the individual notes has to do with the change in speed, has to do with pauses, has to do with phrasing. Some patterns sort of repeat themselves, and you kind of sort of notice these things, so we kind of lump that into the rhythm section. Finally, or penultimately, we have the repetition of things. So sometimes a bird repeats itself, sometimes it doesn't repeat itself at all, sometimes it repeats itself for a long time and then does something else and then repeats something else. So we look for that in a bird song in helping us remember things. And then finally, and most subjectively, is mnemonics. Mnemonics is always a little tricky. Somebody who comes up with an English phrase that they think kind of sounds like the bird phrase. And I'm with people on like 10% of those, and about 90%, I don't hear it until somebody does an impression of it. So we'll do some impressions tonight, and maybe you guys will hear it, maybe you won't. but it won't really matter. I should add one other thing, which is tonal quality. And this is very subjective, so it's kind of hard to talk about as an objective measure, but sometimes we say, well, does it sound, and then this gets, you know, does it sound pretty, right? Does it sound metallic? Does it sound harsh? Does it sound buzzy? Does it sound like a flute, right? Does it sound like various different things that you could hear when you kind of listen to the song? And so people will make those kinds of judgments, and they will talk about them, and obviously we won't always sort of agree, but it can help a little bit in our conversations about these birds. Finally, we're going to do this a lot here today, is the visualizing the bird song. So when we play these songs tonight, I'm going to be showing you the spectrogram. And if you've never seen a spectrogram before, it's pretty straightforward. The y-axis is pitch, so the higher on the spectrogram you are, the higher the note's going to be. The lower on the spectrogram, the lower the pitch is going to be. And then the x-axis is just time. So there'll be some numbers that you won't be able to see them in some cases, but they're usually in seconds. So this is a 1 second interval, so this whole phrase is a little bit more than sort of 1 second long. And you just read it left to right. So this would be, usually you look for the darkest line. Sometimes there are these other lines that occur, but if it's just sort of a single note, it'll appear as sort of a dark line. And what you have here is one note with a descending pitch, another note with a descending pitch, and a third note with a little wiggle in the middle, but it's kind of going down in general. So this is going do, do, do. Yes, that was very pretty. So with that amazing impression, does anybody know what bird that is? Do, do, do. Any guesses? No? Oh. This, and we'll see it later, is an eastern meadowlark. And you'll hear the much better version of it here in just a little bit. All right, so let's listen to the birds. So the barred owl, probably the most well-known mnemonic of the barred owl is "Who cooks for you?" or "Who cooks for you all?" By show of hands, how many have heard this mnemonic before? By show of hands, how many think this is a good mnemonic that just tells you something? Yeah, I think this is one of the 10% is like, I can hear that, right? That's pretty good. So who cooks for you? Who cooks for you all? You know, it's 8 or 9 notes. It's pretty low, right? It's an owl, so it's low in pitch. It's not super fast, right? We've got some things here. It takes a long pause between phrases. And some people say it's loud, so that's pretty true. It carries through the forest at night. It sounds like hooting. That makes sense. It's an owl. But some people say it sounds like laughing. Some people even say it's the laughing owl. So it's like, all right, sure. So let's see if that's what that sounds. Let's see how much of that makes sense. What do you think? Who cooks for you? Who cooks for you all? One more time. And notice how low it is in the pitch. So as it's going down, just see like all those notes are way down there at the bottom. This is not a high-pitched sound. Yeah. So we'll allow it. We'll allow who cooks for you, who cooks for you all. All right. So most of you are already familiar with this one, so we'll move on. Oriole. Who feeds their orioles? Good job. Yeah. They're so pretty, aren't they? They're so great. And orioles are, their song is, let's start with the tonal quality, just because I think it's very pretty, right? It's very kind of pure toned. It's sort of a whistling kind of, I guess, I threw in flute-like here because I kind of thought it sounded like a flute. But they tend to be paired notes with the rhythm, and there tend to be these things called warm-up notes, where it feels like they're getting started to do something. And the pairs tend to be repeated between sort of 2 and 7 times. And we have a longer repetition here going here with the oriole. You hear that? It is paired, like each. So let me play it again, and then I'll pause it so you can kind of see the spectrogram. So there is that pair, right? There's that little gap in between as it's going down. So it's dun 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 dun. Dun, dun, dun. I don't know, it could be a march. So, but it's the dun, 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 dun. And so that's that kind of that warm-up bit. So they oftentimes have those little what's called the warm-up notes in between, but in between those sort of paired notes. And it is kind of, I guess, whistling and flute-like. Does that seem fair? Yeah, it's a good one. Let's keep going. Chickadee. All right. Here's the spectrogram. What does it sound like? What? Dee, Phoebe, right? Or some people say, hey, sweetie. No, but Phoebe, it's descending. It's a 2 or 3 syllable phrase, and it's very clear. So sometimes this bottom note breaks into 2, so that's where the hey sweetie is. So it's either 2 notes, do, do, or do, do, do. So hey, Phoebe, or hey sweetie. So that's the mating call, I think. The chickadee has the more territorial call, which is the chickadee-dee-dee-dee thing. So chickadees will do that when they're more get out of my face kind of thing. This is more, hey, I sure do like making babies. All right, now let's get into some weird ones. Who knows what a black and white warbler is? How would you describe a black and white warbler? Go ahead. Yeah.
First time I saw one was in my backyard recently, and I thought at first he was a little woodpecker hopping up the tree, and that's what I thought of at first.
Yeah, my friend calls them zebra birds. Yeah, I can see that. And did you hear it when you saw it?
Yeah, I had my Merlin on.
Yeah. So some people say this is a squeaky wheel bird. This has a very high pitch. It's very steady. It's very quick. Some people say the mnemonic they use is wheezy, 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 which again, fine, if that's what you hear. That's what you want. But let's hear. So either I hear squeaky wheel, other people hear wheezy. So let's give it a shot. It's very high. So squeaky wheel? Yeah. Wheezy? No. If you said wheezy, fine, right? We can still be friends, but I don't know. But this is one of the warblers that are like, I know this guy, right? It's hard to mistake that. So it's really high, really squeaky, and just kind of a steady, I guess, wheezy, wheezy, wheezy. So there you go. Here's another warbler. So I chose warblers for today because we're like right in the middle of migration season. So this is the time of year where we can actually see these crazy birds that are coming up from Colombia and coming and visiting us in their very nice way. I mean, maybe this is a Cuban one, but I'd like to believe that this one is from Colombia. So black-throated green warblers actually have 2 calls. There's what's called the unaccented and the accented, and I always get them wrong. But I think the one that I have up here is the ZZ-ZUZU-Z, which is the unaccented call, and it's more of the male territorial call. And then there's the accented call, and if you guys know the answer, save it until later. And then there's the accented call, which is Z, 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 Zoo, Z. And it tends to be more higher. So there's Z, 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 Zoo, Zoo, Z, and Z, 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 Zoo, Z. So lots of zoos, lots of Z's. Tends to be a 5-note phrase. There's these, you'll see these little notes here that they're straight up and down. That is not a musical sound, right? That's just going to be a chip. It's a very short, very unmusical sound that repeats within its sort of phrases. And then people will say of this bird that it's buzzy, right? So you'll see in the spectrogram sort of a kind of a fat line that shows that it has sort of a buzzy sort of quality to it, almost like a really fast trill. So there's the chips, and then there's the buzz. That's pretty obvious, right? I mean, it's Z, Z, Zoo, Zoo, Z, obviously. But so these notes, those beginning notes, see how fat that spectrogram is? That indicates sort of more of a buzzy quality, that it's not landing on sort of one note, one particular sort of pitch. Whereas these two notes, the zoo-zoos, are a little more pure and on the pitch. So let me just play it one more time so you can kind of hear the difference. Hear that whistle is a lot more clear. I love those guys. So yeah, so they're pretty great, and you can hear them pretty. I say they're more of like I always think of them as more of an early migration bird, and I'm not entirely sure if that's true. But if you're out in the woods, this is kind of where they like to hang out, and they're great. So anyway, so remember, this is because there's going to quiz. This is the unaccented song, which is the ZZ Zoo, and the accented song, which is the ZZZ Zoo. So there you go. All right. Ovenbird. Here's where me and mnemonics have a big fight, because the mnemonic people say that this bird is saying teacher, 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 and I cannot hear it. Does anybody, have you guys heard the Ovenbird song before? Anybody? Show hands, Ovenbird. Yeah. Teacher? Pizza. Oh, who said pizza? I'll give you pizza. I will give pizza before teacher. But it's definitely a repeated note. It gets louder as it goes through. So, you know, and it gets more intense, and then sometimes ends with a flourish. And it's a little buzz at the end. So here's the Ovenbird. Super cool looking. You'll see it on the ground if you see it. It's more of a ground warbler, and it sounds like this. There's no way in hell that thing is saying teacher. But I will try to hear it one more time. No. But fine, right? If you want to hear teacher, 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 that's fine. But pizza, I'm a little more okay with pizza. Ovenbirds, yeah.
Sounds like a loose fan belt.
Ooh, loose fan belt. I like that. Let's call it the loose fan belt bird. Sure, yeah. It's a lot of these birds, nice mechanical engine terms, really sort of bring out. It's like, is my bird saying that, or is my car saying that? And maybe we could do a podcast. It's like bird or car, right? And have people win fabulous prizes. That's what we should do. Liz, can we have a? All right. All right, another warbler. Tennessee warbler. Been pretty vocal this year. Been outside my house, scaring the heck out of my cats for some odd reason. I like the Tennessee warbler because it has a 3-part song, and it seems to get faster as it goes. And it goes, it gets kind of trilly. So it's pretty high pitched. People say it sounds sharp and chirpy or chippy, and apparently I just left repetition blank, so who knows if it repeats. But there's repetition in it, you'll see. So listen for the 3-part song. 3 parts. So it starts off a little slow, a little faster, faster still. So it's the 3 parts. So it's the Tennessee warbler. They're cool looking. Unfortunately, this is not a picture that I took. So we'll just have to take their word for it that that is a Tennessee warbler. And so we don't know if that one's from Colombia, probably a Cuban. But here's the first part of the song. Here's the second part. Here's the third part. All right, so 3 repeated notes, 2 repeated notes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And they're all straight up and down, right? So it's not very musical, right? It's that chippy sound, chip, 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 chip. You know, a little bit of movement here. It's going up and up and up, down, but a lot of sort of straight up and down. So not, I guess, in some people's minds, not the prettiest of bird song. All right, back to something kind of normal. And people, I'm all right with this, mnemonic. So cheer, 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 or birdie, birdie, birdie. In this case, we have the example of the cheer, cheer call. It tends to start with some ascending notes and then sharply descending notes. So it's do, 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 right? Do, 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 do. So that was very good. I did a very good job on that one. So, and then it usually speeds up. So let's give it a shot. Yeah. That's a cheer, cheer. And then maybe more cheer. I'm not entirely sure where that's supposed to go. So sometimes it's birdie, 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 but this is cheer, cheer. Chip, 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 chip. So people say that, especially at the beginning, that that's cleared, that's a clear sound, and it's a slurred whistle, right? Zzz, zzz. And of course, everybody knows a cardinal. So how about a robin, right? Robin says cheer up and cheerily. So they tend to have 2 and 3 syllable songs. Well, actually, they have a wide variety of songs. So we're talking about this type particularly. It has an interesting kind of feature of the robin is that its dawn song is like this, but faster. So it's just a little more excited in the morning because it just has some energy that it has to get out. And so it'll do its cheer up cheerily a little more quickly in the morning. Let me give it a shot. So do you hear it? Cheer up cheerily? Maybe? It does have these kind of bracket notes. So these are more just kind of chips in the side. Let me play it again so you can. So some of them are the cheer ups. So this is the cheer up cheerily, and this is kind of just this bracket sound that it'll have on the side. Bracket. 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 So it'll be up there and doing its thing. So pretty common, right? Pretty nice. You guys all know that robins are here year-round. So robins cannot be a sign of spring. That's a hill I'm going to die on. All right, now, here's the trick. What is the difference between the robin song and the rose-breasted grosbeak song? So a lot of people say they're basically saying the same thing, but the rose-breasted grosbeak is doing it in a more pretty way and just kind of goes on a little bit too long. What do you think? Robin E?
No bracket.
No bracket. A little bit all over the place, right? It's not as straightforwardly cheer up cheerily, but it still has a little, it's kind of at that same pitch, right? It's at that same-ish kind of length of the syllable. Let me go back to the robin and we could try again. Oops. So it's a little harsher, right? It's a little less musical. It's a little slower, right? And it doesn't kind of meander as much. Whereas the rose-breasted grosbeak, which is a prettier bird, right? We know, has a little bit more going on for it. Yeah, I like that one. All right, one of my favorites. Maybe the hermit thrush is better, but the hermit thrush doesn't stick around, so nuts to him. But wood thrush, one of the most obviously flute-like sounding birds, in my opinion, at least in the. This is also one of these sort of three-part songs. So the middle part, what the people say is e-u-lay, is very, very flute-like. This is the song here, so you can actually see it. So this is the e-u-lay. It has some beginning notes down here, and then it has this little buzz at the top. But the e-u-lay in the middle, we'll say, is very flute-like. And a lot of the thrushes, including the hermit thrush, have this sort of flute-like element to it. But the wood thrush, the easiest way to know if you're dealing with the wood thrush is if it ends with this little flourish at the end. So if it kind of goes off forever, that's a hermit thrush. We don't like him anyway, so we like the wood thrush. That little buzz. You like that? So flute-like, right? I say flute-like. One more time. Yeah. All right. All right, here's another one that you might know. So the eastern towhee is, the mnemonic is drink your tea. This is the one that I mentioned is having a duet with itself, right? Where the syrinx is, the sound is, the air is coming out differently from the different bronchial tubes. I think that's right, bronchial tubes, does that sound right? Anybody know? And it's a 1 second phrase ended with a trill or sort of a long note. This one is more of a long note. The tempo is slow, and the tonal quality, people say, is metallic beginning with a musical ending. So I kind of like that. It's like a glass of wine. It has a sharp note at the beginning and a musical ending. So drink your tea. If you guys know what I'm talking about, drink your tea. All right, let's hear it. Drink your tea. So it ends with that sharp beginning. So that's not the drink your tea, right? That sharp beginning is just kind of getting warmed up, and then it's the drink your tea. So let's hear it one more time. Drink your tea. And I should say that sharp beginning. So let me play it for you one more time, because sometimes that's all the towhee's going to say. That sharp, that zhit. And that's more of just like a call, right? So sometimes it just does that sort of sharp call, and you don't actually hear the drink your tea. So interestingly enough, right, the part that isn't the drink your tea is sometimes the most easily identifiable that you're dealing with a towhee. And of course, they got these cool red eyes. Yeah. So I took this picture at Donald County Park. So I think he looks very happy to see me. It's like, what a beautiful morning it is at Donald County Park. All right, how about a chipping sparrow? These little guys are cool. You hear them oftentimes in the conifers. They're littler sparrows. They got the little red hat, kind of a little white action going on here, and they're very known for being the one-note dudes. They are just a long trill. Here we go. And that's it. Nothing fancy, just a 3 to 4 second trill with 50 plus identical chip notes. Oops. Oh, we gotta go back. One more time. No moving, steady, calm. We're not out of breath, right? Warbling vireo, total opposite. Warbling vireo can't find a note, refuses to repeat a note, and apparently says, when I see you, I will seize you and I will squeeze you till you squirt. So I both put this in quotes and bold because I think this is a bold statement for what this bird is saying. So the warble is a common way of talking about birds. The warble is when you can't really kind of follow the rhythm because there's too many notes going on, and then they're all over the place, right? That it is very difficult to figure out what the pattern is, if any. So this is the warbling vireo. You'll hear them in the woods throughout the summer. And if you can hear, when I see you, I will seize you, and will squeeze you till you squirt, then you have a prize. Yes? No? One more time. Maybe? One more time. No, right? It's just, there's a lot of stuff going on. And maybe this is a shortened version. Maybe he's just saying, when I see you, I will squeeze you, or seize you, or squirt, or something. I don't know. But they're cool little birds. I didn't take this picture, but he looks happy. And I think in general he is. This is a good little bird. All right, remember I was telling you that some birds you can only tell by hearing them? So this is one of those birds. This is a flycatcher. In my opinion, they all look the same. This is why I don't have a picture of one, because I have no idea what I'm looking at when I take a picture of it, unless it's singing. So this is apparently a picture of a wood pewee, and which, fine, I'll take your word for it, but I'm only going to know if I hear the pee-a-wee. So the pee-a-wee of the wood pewee, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, right? So I can hear that. Pee-a-wee. Perfect, right? And it's just, and look at that spectrogram, right? That is not moving anywhere. Up, down, up, and then a little zoop, a little long flourish at the end. So people say that's a very clear sound, that it's whistling, that it is slurred as it goes up. And the pewee will do this with very long pauses in between. So it'll be the same kind of song, and then he'll wait a little while, and then he'll go again. But again, especially in the early summer, and well, I guess maybe, yeah, probably right now, you can hear him out staking his territory. So they're cool. They're cool little guys. And again, leaves, so you probably won't see him. But even if you did see him, he would look like that, and you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. So you just listen for the pewee. Okay. When I first heard this bird, I first of all didn't know it was real, because everyone used to make fun of me and said, snipes aren't real, you dummy. Go on a snipe hunt because they don't exist. And I was like, but I first heard this in Iceland. And I was in the lava fields of Iceland, in this very creepy part of Iceland. And so I heard this, and I thought the elves were coming to get me, because this is not a normal sound. And part of the reason why it's not a normal sound is it's not coming out of the snipe's vocal cords. The snipe makes a sound as it flies. So this is called the winnowing sound. And so this is the one sound that I have that isn't produced from the vocal cords. It is as the wind goes over the snipe's wings. So, but they're around here. They're not just in Iceland. They're around here too. But imagine yourself in a creepy part of Iceland, or just in the creepy woods in a creepy time, and you start hearing this crap up in the sky. What is that? That is not a bird sound. That's an elf. He's coming to get you. And apparently he's saying hoo hoo hoo, which is Icelandic for you're about to die because I'm an So anyway, all right, so we've got some starting birds here. I want to just play for you a little a clip of a time that I was out in the woods and I just heard some bird sound. And we're just gonna kind of listen. It's kind of quiet, so we'll have to, stop yelling and whispering in the back, right? So listen sort of carefully, and we'll see if we can pick out any bird from the cacophony of sound that's playing in the background here. All right, I bet you got one. $100 says I know what the one is that you all know. So what's the obvious one? Turkey. So I didn't even have to do the turkey, right? You guys just knew it because you're smart. Did you hear anybody else? Wood thrush. Cardinal.
Black-capped chickadee.
What's that? Yeah, he's like right at the end. Yeah. At the beginning? So we'll play it one more time. We'll see if we can. So listen for the cardinal, which is the choo choo choo. The wood thrush, which is that whistly with the flourish at the end, and then I think a robin. I think maybe a song sparrow or some kind. We'll try it one more time. Cardinal, wood thrush, turkey. So if you'll notice here, this was 5:26 in the morning. So there is a robin on that recording. It's just a little hyper, so it might not have sounded like the robin that we heard before. But there's a robin in there, definitely a wood thrush, definitely a cardinal, and a turkey, maybe some other stuff. So it can be a challenge, right? You're out there, and distinguishing what sort of one sound from another, it's not always easy, especially if you're doing dawn song, or like the 2 hours before dawn is when things really start to sort of ramp up, and the 2 hours after. So if you just want to be, just hit with bird song, go out then, right? Just wait for sunrise and just let it attack you. Otherwise, just wait until noon, and then you'll hear like one every 5 minutes. So you'll be fine. I did want to talk a little bit about grassland birds. I don't want to go too much longer than an hour here, so I might go kind of quickly through this. But Pheasant Branch Pheasant Branch Conservancy recently acquired 160 acres that we are planting to Platinum Prairie, and we were just finished planting the final quarter. There we go. Of the prairie, and we are monitoring the area to see if some of the grassland birds are returning. Because with grassland birds, what they need is, it's not really the quality of the prairie that matters so much as the acreage, right? So the more acres of prairie you get, the more likely you're going to have some grassland birds. And so we're very interested in a certain number of species. In fact, if you get a chance, I have them printed up on a laminated sheet back here, but I have some of them up here because I think some of them say cool things. And one of them, which isn't the coolest thing, but this is Pheasant Branch Conservancy, is the pheasant. The mnemonic is caw-caw. Some people say it's like a rooster that gets interrupted. It's a two-syllable phrase. It happens all day long, and it is not pretty. So anyone who finds that attractive can have that pheasant. That's fine. But I remember growing up with my family were hunters, and my dad had a pheasant call. And I remember him making that terrible sound and thinking it was hilarious at how terrible I thought it sounded. But then, surprise, surprise, that's actually what they sound like, right? They sound like that horrible thing. Oh, God, why? All right. But here's a pretty one. So this was the picture I showed at the beginning, right? This is the spectrogram that I showed you at the beginning, the doo, doo, doo. And some people say it's saying see you. Some people say it's saying see your, whatever that is. And some people say it's saying spring of the year, which, fine. It's got these descending notes. They're usually 4 to 5 syllable phrases. And this is also pretty clear and pretty mellow. I think this is a very, very pretty song. Doo, doo, doo. One more time. So you guys you'll hear these guys singing this all day long. Does that sound familiar to anybody? Yeah. And so these guys are back, right? I've talked to a lot of pheasant patch folk, and they said, man, I haven't heard, we haven't had meadowlarks nesting here for like the longest time. And in the past few years, we've been seeing a lot more meadowlarks, not just kind of stopping and saying hello, but actually staying and breeding. And so we're very happy to have meadowlarks back. You don't have meadowlarks at the Arboretum, so haha. And so we got them, not the Arboretum. All right, here's my favorite grassland bird. It's the bobolink. People say it sounds like R2-D2 because it does. And doesn't have a mnemonic because don't even try. You will find these guys helicoptering around. They're kind of like red-winged blackbirds. They're very territorial. They helicopter around their area and they yell at you. And the males have this cool blonde mohawk because they're just tough. And these guys, their migration is insane. These guys come up from Argentina all the way up to come visit us, and so they'll stop in Columbia, right? But then they come to see us. So here we go, bobolink, R2-D2. I love it. All right, one more time because it's just so fun. R2-D2, yes. So, and we don't have to say I'll see you when you squirt or any of those weird mnemonics. Just R2-D2. Field sparrow, this one's not super rare. We've had these before, but I included them because they have the fun bouncing ball sound. It starts off slow and gets faster and faster and faster. And so, sparrows, to some people, sparrows just look like brown birds, right? And they're just as much of a mystery as a flycatcher. So if you can hear this, you're dealing with a field sparrow. So it's like a bouncing ball, right? So it starts off slow and picks up speed. So that's cool. How about this? Savannah sparrow. So Savannah sparrows are a little more buzzy, right? They sound more insect-like. And in fact, this picture I took at the acre property, and he's got a bug in his mouth. So thought that was cool. So they have a 3-part song with some intro notes and then some buzzes. You get this high trill and then a descending trill. And like I said, it's sort of buzzily at the end and sort of whistly at the beginning. That's kind of pretty. One more time. So, cheep, cheep, cheep. So sometimes you won't hear the initial cheeps, right? Sometimes you just, because the buzz is a little bit more sort of prominent. So when you listen, if you're out there, listen for that high buzz and then it goes down to the lower buzz. It's a do. Because there's this other buzzy one, the grasshopper sparrow, which just has a long buzz. And it has these little introductory tinkle notes that you very rarely hear, but you'll hear this long buzz and it just sounds like a bug. right? So that hence grasshopper sparrow, right? Has a very insect-like sound, and he's got a flat head, and he's mad at it all the time, and he's just cool. I think he's mad because of the flat head. So you hear that tinkle, that little tinkle at the beginning, and then the buzz. Yes, so if you include the tinkle, apparently it's saying pick up the breeze. So pick up the breeze, which, fine, if that's what you want. Pick up the breeze. Sure. All right. Willow flycatcher. So another flycatcher, can't tell the difference by looking at it. Or some people can, actually. This has something going on with the beak that makes it easier to identify. But most easily identified by going Fitzbue in the grassland. So it has I think it's a savanna species actually. So it has a descending phrase. It's just 2 syllables, and it's kind of buzzy, but people very clearly think it's saying Fitzbue. Fitzbue? Or sure. So these guys are great, right? So again, if you have a good prairie, you're going to hear some willow flycatchers, and of course we're hearing them again at Pheasant Branch. So hooray for us! All right. That's it for birds. Now we have to talk about Merlin. So, I love Merlin. Merlin is, I have a pretty severe case of tinnitus. So there's a lot of these things that out in the woods I can't hear. And in some cases, if the pitch gets high enough, it's completely out of my range. So for instance, there's a bird called the cedar waxwing, which has a very high-pitched thing, which I used to be able to hear, right? I used to be able to hear the cedar waxwings, no more. But thanks to Merlin, Merlin can hear things that I can't. And this is an app that I'm sure many of you have heard of before, but it's only getting better. So it rolled out a few years ago, and it was kind of rocky. The algorithm wasn't sort of super great, but it's improved, in my opinion, by sort of leaps and bounds. It still gets things wrong. So I have last year I had a less than 1-year-old baby, and I was out at Olin Turville Park, and my baby was making little sounds, and Merlin was just absolutely convinced that it was a great horned owl. So my little baby the owl. So, so it's not perfect, but it's pretty great. So I have the video that kind of shows how it works, but the recording here is the one that I played for you earlier. So you'll be able to see kind of what the screen looks like as it's recording. But I just want to give it a go. So as it detects something, it kind of flashes it. It says, oh, I'm hearing this. Oh, I'm hearing this. So it doesn't quite light up exactly when it's playing the song. It takes a while sometimes for it to figure out what's going on. But it lights up as it makes an identification, and it throws it up there. And sometimes it'll throw something that's just like you wouldn't even see in this location. It's a completely sort of rare species and unknown before. But it's just been my experience. It's just kind of less and less. That's been the case. I took this. I was in Columbia in April, and I was out with a biologist in Minka, and just surrounded by birds that I've never heard of and never seen. So like every bird was a lifer. And so I had my Merlin app, and the biologist was like, yeah, use it, right? Because it's perfect, right? I mean, he was just like, it was like, oh, am I hearing that? He's like, yep, you're hearing that. Am I hearing that? Yep, you're hearing that. And just like everything that the Merlin app, at least in Columbia, was seeing was spot on. It didn't make any mistakes. So I think it's not that it's never ever going to mistake. So remember, babies are not owls. But I think it's a good tool, and it can definitely help you with if it says it's this, you can go and listen to some songs and see if that's really what you're hearing, and maybe it can bring you to songs, some birds that sound similar. But I would make use of it. So it works on your phone. It's free. Connects with eBird. So if you don't eBird yet, you should. Even if you're just starting out, you should definitely report your birds. It's pretty easy to use. Of course, I should say that's bringing technology to nature, and sometimes people are kind of negative on that. It's yet another thing that you're holding and not paying attention to the world around you. And of course, it's not perfect. So babies are owls. And then I will end with something that my kids love, and this is Larkwire. And it is a birdsong learning app that is a game. So it's not quite the best app for like Android. Apple has a better interface, but you could just basically use it on a browser. It isn't free, but it's not very expensive. It's a game format, and it freaks out cats if you use it at home. So what it does is it'll give you this 4x4 grid of birds that kind of sound similar, right? That they're not exactly the same. They can really trip you up. So here are four warblers that you may not know the song. And so it plays the song, and then you guess which one you're hearing. And if you keep on guessing it wrong, everything sort of resets. But if you keep on guessing it right, and if you guess it right enough times, it gives you credit for those birds. And it's worked pretty well with my girls, who are 6 and 8. So they dig it. My cats hate it, and that's kind of fun. But it's a really cool thing. I think it's helped me a lot especially if I'm sort of stuck indoors and can't get out to listen, and especially if the birds aren't around, right? So if it's January and I really want to hear warblers, then I use Larkwire. So I know it costs money, so maybe I shouldn't be shilling something that costs money, but they gave me like $200,000 to say this. So. All right. Thank you, everybody.